On the 12th of August 2021, two police officers in the city of Moab, Utah, received a call about a man hitting a woman on a public street.
Brand County Sheriff's Office.
Hi, I'm calling. I'm right on the corner of Main Street by Moonflower, and we're driving by, and I'd like to report a domestic dispute.
What were they doing?
We drove by, and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
He was slapping her?
Yes, and then we stopped. They ran up and down the sidewalk. He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off.
Okay, you said it's a white van? What kind of white van?
It was a smaller van. The make was a Ford. Model was Transit. Black ladder on the passenger side. White Ford Transit.
White Ford Transit. All right, I will let somebody know. Thank you.
They found them. They separated them. They filmed everything on body camera for over an hour. They had a 911 caller's account, a witness statement, visible injuries on the woman's face, and a state law that told them exactly what to do. And then they drove away. 34 days later, Gabrielle Petito was found strangled in a Wyoming wilderness campsite. She was 22 years old. The man in the van with her that August afternoon, the man a caller had reported slapping her on the street, had already returned home to Florida alone, without explanation. This is not a story about a disappearance. It is not a story about a van life trip gone wrong. Every headline you have read about this case has told you about the search for Gabby Petito. This is the story of what happened before the search. This is the story of the stop in Moab, what the officers saw, what they heard, what they chose, and what the independent review concluded about why they got it wrong. It is the story of a wrongful death lawsuit that was dismissed not because the officers were found to have acted correctly, but because a law written in 1965 says that the government cannot be sued when its agents fail the people they are meant to protect. That lawsuit is now before the Utah Supreme Court. That question is still open. Gabby Petito is not. Gabrielle Venora Petito was born on the 19th of March 1999 in Blue Point, New York, a small community on Long Island's South Shore. She grew up with her mother Nicole, her stepfather Jim Schmidt, her father Joe Petito, and her stepmother Tara, and 6 younger siblings and half-siblings in a family that, by every account, loved her unconditionally and vocally. What people remember about Gabby Petito, consistently and across every account that has since emerged, is energy. She was, her father Joe said, someone whose smile could melt you. Her mother called her a spitfire, someone with goals who did what she could to get there. She had an artist's instinct, keeping journals from a young age, documenting her life with a fidelity that would become, after her death, one of the most painful dimensions of the case. She wrote things down. She had been writing things down her whole life. She loved art. She loved yoga. She loved the idea of movement, of travel, of capturing the world through a lens and sharing it with people she hadn't met yet. She had an Instagram account under the handle @JapsPetito, where she described her interests as art, yoga, and veggies. She was, in the language of the generation she belonged to, building something, a life and a digital presence that felt like an extension of the same creative impulse she had carried since childhood. Her dream, specifically and concretely, was van life. She had read about it, followed accounts built around it, and imagined a version of herself behind the wheel of a converted van, moving through the landscape of a country she wanted to see from the inside. To fund that dream, she worked 50-hour weeks at Taco Bell, saving carefully. She loved that job in a way that surprised people. She loved the community of it, the regularity of it, the sense that she was working towards something specific. She was 22 years old when she left Blue Point for the last time. Her mother Nicole saw her off in the driveway. She later said, "The one thing I hold close to me is the hug we had before she left for the trip, in the driveway." Brian Christopher Laundrie was 23 years old at the time of Gabby's death. He had grown up in Blue Point and later in Northport, Florida, where his parents, Christopher and Roberta Laundrie, had relocated. He and Gabby had known each other from high school. He would later tell friends it was love at first sight, the moment he spotted her outside a deli, pulled over and introduced himself. To the families who met him in those early years, Laundrie presented as quiet, polite, and measured. He shook hands. He made eye contact. He was, as Gabby's father Joe recalled, the kind of young man who made a good first impression. But there was something that friends began to notice once they spent extended time around both of them together. Rose Davis, a friend Gabby made after moving to Florida, described the feeling of being around the two of them for the first time. She said it felt like a parent was watching us on a play date. It was very weird. Laundrie disparaged the job Gabby loved. He texted her that the people she worked with at Taco Bell were lowlifes and that it was disgusting she had become one of them. He told her he couldn't live without her, a sentiment that, in retrospect, reads not as devotion but as a claim of ownership. He told her repeatedly that he felt neglected when she worked, and his possessiveness over her time and attention was something her friends registered clearly, even when Gabby minimized it. He stole her ID one night so she and Rose couldn't go out dancing. When Gabby came home devastated, he gave her gifts. She told Rose she was lucky. She told Rose she didn't deserve him. This is the cycle that researchers who study coercive control have documented in cases across decades and jurisdictions. It is not a spiral of escalating incidents. It is a pattern. Punishment followed by reward, withdrawal followed by affection. The constant calibration of another person's emotional reality so that they begin to locate their own worth in the responses of the person controlling them. Gabby Petito was working 50 hours a week, saving for a dream that was genuinely her own. She wrote in a letter to Laundrie, in a document released years later by the FBI, that she was stressed, that he had been calling her names, and she asked him to stop. She told him, "Just please stop crying and stop calling me names because we're a team and I'm here with you." And then, in the next line, "I'm always going to have your back." She wrote, "Of his pain. You in pain is killing me." That letter was not written from a position of strength. It was written from a position of someone who had accepted, at a very deep level, that his emotional state was her responsibility, that his distress was her failure, that her job was to manage him. This matters. It matters because of what happened in Moab. It matters because of what Gabby said to the officers who separated them on that August afternoon. And it matters because the officers who heard her say it did not recognize it for what it was. On the 2nd of July 2021, Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie left Blue Point in the white Ford Transit Connect van Gabby had purchased and converted herself. Gabby's mother Nicole hugged her daughter in the driveway. She told Brian, "Take care of her." The trip was planned for 4 months. They would visit national parks across the American West, Monument Rocks, Great Sand Dunes, Zion, Bryce Canyon, Arches, Canyonlands, and eventually the Tetons. Gabby documented all of it. She posted photos to Instagram with location tags and captions about the landscape and the light. The account grew. People followed the journey. On the 19th of July, she posted the first, and only, video to her YouTube channel. It was 8 minutes long, a mashup of footage from earlier adventures and the current trip, the two of them laughing and kissing, desert light through the van windows, drone footage of the vehicle moving through open country. It looked exactly like what it was supposed to look like. But Gabby's mother noticed something during the phone calls. Her daughter's mood, she would later say, was off. Bipolar, almost. She would call crying, then be fine, then angry. She was not herself. Nicole thought she was just stressed. The road trip was a big thing. Being in a small van for months was difficult. She did not yet have the framework to name what she was hearing. By early August, the trip had reached the canyon country of southern Utah, and on the 12th of August, in the city of Moab, on a street outside the Moonflower Community Cooperative, an organic grocery, something happened that a passerby stopped to call in. At approximately 4:30 in the afternoon, a witness called 911 to report a domestic incident near the Moonflower Community Cooperative in Moab. The caller was specific. He reported that the man had been slapping the woman. He told the dispatcher, "We drove by and the gentleman was slapping the girl. Then we stopped." He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off. This was not an ambiguous call. It described a specific act, observed directly, reported immediately. Officers Eric Pratt and Daniel Robbins located the white van shortly afterward. The vehicle had been driving erratically, It had exceeded the speed limit, abruptly left its lane and struck a curb. When Pratt approached the passenger side of the van, Gabrielle Petito was crying uncontrollably. She was not calming down. She was not composed. At no point during the interaction, Pratt would later note in his own report, did she stop crying, stop breathing heavily, or compose a sentence without needing to wipe away tears, wipe her nose, or rub her knees with her hands. Laundrie, by contrast, was calm. He was articulate. He joked with the officers. He had scratches on his arms, his face, and his neck, and he explained that he had been trying to push Petito away as she tried to take the van keys from him. He characterized her as someone who gets really worked up. He used the word crazy, though he softened it. The officers separated them. One stayed with Laundrie. Officer Pratt spoke with Gabby in the back of the patrol car. What happened in that patrol car is documented on body cam. It is publicly available. It has been seen by millions of people. Pratt told Petito that 2 people had come forward saying they saw Laundrie hit her, and Gabby Petito, sitting in the back of a police car crying, with a visible cut on her face that she said burned when she touched it, told the officer, "To be honest, I hit him first." She told him Laundrie had grabbed her face. She told him she had a cut from his nail. But she led with the admission that she had struck first, and she repeated it, and the officer accepted the framing she offered. He did not pursue the prior question, the one the 911 caller had answered clearly before the stop even began. Pratt in the bodycam footage can be heard asking a colleague, "How far do you want to go with this?" A short time later, he called his supervisor. In the recorded audio, he asked, "But is there a way to not do anything on this?" He described what he was observing as a little slap fight between fiancés who love each other and want to be together. He said, "I can't perceive does what happened here digress into a situation where he's going to be a battered man. But then again," he added, "I don't have a crystal ball." The officers decided not to make an arrest. They decided not to issue a citation. Utah state law uses the word shall when it describes what officers must do when they have probable cause to believe domestic violence has occurred. Shall is not a suggestion. It is a legal directive. The officers arranged for Laundrie to spend the night at the Bowen Motel, paid for by a local domestic violence outreach organisation. Gabby kept the van. The following day, the couple voluntarily reunited. They left Moab together, passed through Salt Lake City, and drove toward Wyoming. The bodycam footage was filed. The report was closed. The 911 caller was never contacted for a formal statement. The last confirmed sighting of Gabrielle Petito on surveillance footage was at a Whole Foods market in Jackson, Wyoming, on the 27th of August 2021. After that date, the text messages her family received from her phone were different. On the 27th, her mother received a message that referenced a difficulty contacting her grandfather Stan, except Gabby never called him Stan. She called him Grandpa. Her mother noticed the language. She put it aside. Later, on the 30th of August, she received a text that read, "No service in Yosemite." Gabby was not near Yosemite. The FBI would later confirm that Laundrie had sent fake text messages from Petito's phone in order to delay the discovery of her disappearance. Gabby Petito is believed to have been killed around the 28th of August, 2021, at the Spread Creek Dispersed Camping Area in Wyoming's Bridger Teton National Forest. On the 1st of September, Brian Laundrie arrived back at his parents' home in Northport, Florida. He was driving Gabby's van. He was alone. A license plate reader recorded the vehicle entering the city. He said nothing about Gabby's whereabouts to anyone outside his immediate family. He went camping at Fort DeSoto Park with his parents and sister over the Labor Day weekend. He posted nothing. He said nothing. On the 11th of September, Gabby's mother, Nicole Schmidt, filed a missing person report with the Suffolk County Police Department in New York. That same evening, Northport police knocked on the Laundrie's door. They were handed a lawyer's phone number. The search for Gabrielle Petito became, within days, one of the most visible missing person cases in American media history. The combination of Gabby's documented social media presence, the bodycam footage that had been released in the days after her disappearance was reported, and the total silence of the Laundrie family created a case that drew both national attention and intense, sustained public criticism of Brian. Laundrie and those around him. Amateur investigators online cross-referenced Gabby's posts with Google Maps satellite imagery. One group of TikTok users identified the Spread Creek campsite from the drone footage in Gabby's YouTube video, footage she had taken weeks before she died, of the same stretch of Wyoming wilderness where her body would later be found. On the 19th of September 2021, FBI search teams discovered human remains in the Bridger-Teton National Forest near the Spread Creek dispersed camping area. The family was notified that day. The coroner confirmed the identity shortly afterward. Gabrielle Petito was found in the fetal position on the ground, in the wilderness, weeks after she had been left there. The cause of death, determined by Teton County Coroner Dr. Brent Blue, was manual strangulation and blunt force trauma to the head and neck. The manner of death was homicide. She was 22 years old. 3 days later, the Laundrie family reported that Brian had been missing since the 13th of September, 4 days before he was officially reported absent, during which time Northport police had been conducting surveillance on the home and had mistaken Laundrie's mother for Laundrie himself. When she returned to the house in similar clothing, he had walked into a nature reserve down the road from his parents' home, and he did not come back. On the 20th of October 2021, Brian Laundrie's father Chris accompanied investigators to the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park near the family home. It was one of Brian's favourite places. His father found a waterproof dry bag. A short time later, partial skeletal remains were discovered nearby. Dental records confirmed Brian Laundrie, 23 years old, had died by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Beside the remains was a notebook. It had been underwater for approximately 5 weeks. The FBI worked to recover its contents. In January 2022, the Bureau confirmed that the notebook contained Brian Laundrie's admission of responsibility for Gabby Petito's death. In June 2022, the contents were made public through the Laundrie family's attorney. What Laundrie wrote was this. He described Gabby being injured crossing a stream, losing her footing, falling into the water. He described her pain, her shaking, the sound she made. He wrote that she was freezing, gasping, begging for an end to her pain. And then he wrote, in the language he chose, I ended her life. I thought it was merciful, that it is what she wanted, but I see now all the mistakes I made. I panicked. I was in shock. The coroner found no evidence consistent with the scenario Laundrie described. The manner of death was manual strangulation. The injuries to Gabby Petito's head and neck were not consistent with a fall. The Petito family's attorney put it directly. He writes this farcical tale about her falling down, and then states he ended her life. He cannot admit, I killed her. What the notebook does confirm, regardless of its characterization of the events preceding it, is this. Brian Laundrie manually strangled Gabrielle Petito on or around the 28th of August 2021 in Wyoming. He then drove her van back to Florida. He spent Labor Day with his family. He sent fake text messages from her phone. He said nothing. For 12 days while her family was searching for her, he knew exactly where she was. He wrote in the notebook, from the moment I decided, took away her pain, I knew I couldn't go on without her. He wrote, Gabby hated people who litter. Please pick up all of my things. And then he killed himself. There are things we need to be precise about, because the story of Gabby Petito has been told many times, as a disappearance, as a media spectacle, as a commentary on who we search for and who we don't. All of those stories are valid, but there is one story that has not been told with enough precision. The story of what happened in Moab. An independent investigation into the conduct of officers Pratt and Robbins was completed and released publicly. It ran to 99 pages. It was conducted by a captain from the Price City Police Department, an agency located roughly 120 miles from Moab. The review's conclusion was careful but unambiguous. The officers made several unintentional mistakes that stemmed from the fact that they failed to cite Petito for domestic violence. The report noted, and this phrase matters, that the investigation had been pursuing an allegation against Petito, while the reason for the initial detention, the 2 911 calls reporting a man shoving and slapping a woman, fell by the wayside. Even when Gabby reported a battery that caused injury, the review found her statement was entirely ignored. The report used specific language. It found that the officers appeared to be operating under a confirmation bias that influenced how they interpreted the evidence and their theory of the case. They had started with a conclusion that Petito was the aggressor, and they had processed everything that followed through that lens. Brian Laundrie was thoroughly examined for evidence. His clothing was checked for injuries he might not be aware of. Photographs were taken of his injuries. He was offered EMS services. None of this was provided to Gabby Petito, even after she disclosed that she had been grabbed, that her face had been touched, that there was a cut that burned when she pressed it. The review also found that no statement was ever obtained from the original 911 caller, the person who had reported, directly and specifically, that he had seen a man slapping a woman on a public street. That caller was the closest thing to an objective witness the officers had. He was never contacted. Utah state law on domestic violence uses the word shall. When officers have probable cause to believe a domestic violence offence has occurred, the law does not give them discretion. It directs them to act. The review found that probable cause existed. The officers had the 911 report, they had a second witness account, they had visible injuries on Petito's face, they had her own admission that Laundrie had grabbed her face, and the review found the statements of all those involved, along with the evidence presented, provided probable cause for an arrest. The arrest was not made. What the officers had on that shoulder of the road in Moab was every element the law requires. What they exercised, instead of the law, was sympathy. Officer Pratt, in his bodycam footage, is heard asking, "But is there a way to not do anything on this?" His supervisor, by his account, left the decision with him. He described the encounter as a little slap fight between fiancés who love each other. He said he couldn't perceive it escalating. In the years since, a further detail has emerged that is relevant to how the stop was conducted. A woman came forward to allege that Officer Pratt, the lead officer at the stop, had been abusive toward her in a prior relationship. She alleged that he had threatened to kill her. These allegations have not been proven in court, but they are part of the public record of the case. They were cited by the Petito family's attorney as context for how Pratt approached the encounter with Gabby. The Petito family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the city of Moab, the Moab Police Department, Officer Pratt, Officer Robbins, and 2 other named defendants. The lawsuit alleged gross negligence, that the officers had sympathized with Laundrie, had failed to follow their own mandatory law, and that their conduct had emboldened him and contributed to conditions that made Gabby's death more likely. It also alleged something that Gabby's attorney later confirmed. During the stop, Gabby called her parents. She told them she was fine. She told them the police would take care of things. She told her family, in real time, that the system was handling it. The system was not handling it. On the 20th of November 2024, Judge Don Torgerson of Utah's 7th District Court dismissed the family's lawsuit. He dismissed it not on the basis that the officers were found to have acted correctly. The independent review had already concluded otherwise. He dismissed it because of Utah's Governmental Immunity Act, a law enacted in 1965 that prohibits wrongful death claims against governmental entities. The judge acknowledged that he was bound by existing legal precedent. He noted that higher courts had the authority to consider whether that precedent was constitutional. The Petito family appealed. On the 4th of March 2026, oral arguments in the Petito family's case were heard before the Utah Supreme Court. The central constitutional question is this: whether Utah's Governmental Immunity Act, as applied to wrongful death claims, violates Article XVI, Section 5 of the Utah Constitution, the provision that enshrines the right of families to seek redress when their loved ones are wrongfully killed. The family's legal brief argues that the immunity doctrine does not express the sovereignty of the people. It expresses the arrogance of government that refuses to take responsibility for its wrongs and to provide redress. The city of Moab, in its own filings, maintained that its officers had treated Gabby Petito with kindness, respect and empathy. It stated that she and Laundrie had voluntarily reunited the following day and left Moab like millions of other tourists before and since. Like millions of other tourists. Gabby Petito was not like the millions of other tourists who passed through Moab. She was a woman with visible injuries on her face, sitting in the back of a police cruiser, unable to stop crying, telling an officer that a man had grabbed her face, while that man stood outside on the road, calm, joking, and describing her as someone who gets really worked up. The officers had a 911 call. They had a witness. They had Utah state law. They had her face. They had her own account. They had everything. And they decided that this was a little slap fight between people who loved each other. Gabrielle Petito wanted to be a travel content creator. She wanted to show people the country she lived in, through a lens that was entirely her own. She had worked 50-hour weeks at a job she genuinely loved to pay for a van she had converted herself. She had started a YouTube channel. She had posted her first video. She was 22 years old. The Gabby Petito Foundation was established after her death by her family, dedicated to helping find missing persons and supporting domestic violence awareness organizations. Her parents have lobbied for legislative change. They have appeared before committees. They have kept her name in the conversation when the coverage moved on. They are, at the time of this documentary, still in court. There is a detail from the body cam footage that stays with you. During the stop on that August afternoon in Moab, one of the officers sat with Gabby in the back of the patrol car and explained the domestic violence law to her. He told her that Utah required police to act. He told her there was a mandatory response. Gabby Petito cried harder. She said she didn't want to be separated from Brian. She asked the officer if she was going to have anxiety. She was not resisting protection. She was afraid of what happened when she was left alone with him. The system she had been told would take care of things looked at that fear, the crying, the self-blame, the hyperventilation, the desperate please don't separate us, and it called it a mental health break. It was not a mental health break. It was a woman who had learned very thoroughly that the person she loved was dangerous. And it was a system that had every instrument required to see what was happening, and chose instead to see what was convenient. Gabby Petito trusted the police that afternoon. She told her parents the police would handle it. She deserved a system equal to that trust. The case before the Utah Supreme Court will determine whether families like Gabby's can hold that system accountable at all. That ruling has not yet been issued. What has been issued is a record, a 99-page report, an hour of body cam footage, a 911 transcript, a forensic determination, and a written confession. All of it is public. All of it is documented. And none of it brought Gabby Petito home. If anything you heard today sounds familiar, in your own life or in someone else's, please reach out. The resources are in the description below. Don't wait for it to escalate. Don't wait for a visible injury. Don't wait. We'll see you next week.